Chapter the 6th. Journey from Platform E. Harry's last month with the Drubblesnorts was fun. Bubba was now so scared of Harry he would stay locked up in his room most of the time, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vern didn't shut Harry in his shed, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it were empty. This was an improvement in many ways, and Harry took advantage of the situation by taking sweets and watching whatever he wanted on the television. Harry played with his new pig for company. He had decided to call her Pigwiggy, a name he had just made up. His school books were very entrancing. He would lay on his stack of hay reading late into the night. Pigwiggy ran around the basement, going to the bathroom wherever she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come down to make Harry do laundry anymore. Harry waited until the very last day of August to speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station the next day. He thought it would be best to spring it on them last minute. Harry went up to the living room where they were watching a documentary on bricks. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Bubba screamed and ran from the room, arms flailing. Uncle Vern?" Uncle Vern grunted to show he was listening. I need to be at King's Cross tomorrow to go to Hogwarts." Uncle Vern's fingers grasped both armrests of his chair tightly. "Would it be all right if you gave me a lift? Just think, do this one thing and then you'll be rid of me for a while." His fingers dug in deeper and his face turned all red with rage. Harry supposed that meant yes. Harry gave a smile with a thumbs up and walked away. He was on his way back downstairs when Uncle Vern yelled back at him. "Funny way to get to a wizard's school, the train. Too good for magic carpets, are you?" Harry came back into the room to argue but couldn't come up with any sort of response. "Where is this school, anyway?" "Blimey, I don't know," said Harry, realizing this for the first time. He pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket. "I just take the train from platform 2.718287933203625094431117 centillions at 11 o'clock, he read. His aunt and uncle stared. "Platform what?" 2.7182818284. All right, all right, all right. Stop, his aunt interrupted him. "Don't talk rubbish," said Uncle Vern. "There is no platform 2.46, whatever. That's what it says here on my ticket, in the fine print." "Hogwash," said Uncle Vern, "that's what your school should really be called. You'll see. You just wait. All right, we'll take you to King's Cross. We're going up to London tomorrow anyway, or I wouldn't bother. And we're going to dump you there and I best not be seeing you again until next summer, even if this platform what's-it doesn't exist. You hear me? ? "Why are you going to London?" Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly. "Taking Bubba to the hospital," growled Uncle Vern. "Think he has the diarrhea. Can't have him running around with that now before he goes to Smellin'. Wait, why am I telling you this, boy? Off to bed with you. Now git." Harry woke at 10 o'clock the next morning and realized he was very late and nervous he may miss the train. He got up and quickly just pulled on his jeans because he didn't have time to put on his wizard's robes, he'd have to change on the train. He checked his Hogwarts list yet again to make sure he had everything he needed, shoved Pigwiggy in her cage, and then lugged his huge heavy trunk up the stairs and into the Drubblesnorts' brand new Humvee after Uncle Vern had wrecked his third the week before. Once Aunt Petunia had talked Bubba into sitting next to Harry, they set off. Miraculously, they reached King's Cross with 15 minutes to spare. Uncle Vern dumped Harry's trunk onto a cart and wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought this was oddly kind until Uncle Vern stopped dead, facing the platforms with a malicious grin on his face. Well, there you are, boy. Platform 2, Platform 3. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they? Sounds like you're the butt of an elaborate hoax. He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 2 over one platform and a big plastic number 3 over the one next to it, and in the middle, nothing at all. Have a good term, said Uncle Vern with an even nastier smile. He slapped Harry on the back and left without another word, laughing and wiping tears away from his face. Harry turned and saw the Drubblesnorts speed away. All three of them were laughing. Harry's eyes went wide. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks, mostly because of Pigwidge's squealing like she was dying in her cage. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but didn't dare mention platform 2.7182882845904550944311 centillionths. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and when Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was in, he started to get annoyed, thinking Harry was pulling some kind of practical joke on him. Getting desperate, Harry asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said it was all the way on the completely other side of the station. In the end the guard strode away, muttering about time wasters. Harry was in an immense panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had just 5 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts, and he had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could hardly lift, a pocket full of wizard money, and a pig. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something you had to do, like tapping that brick to get into Diagon Alley. He figured he must do the same and began tapping on the walls with his wand while getting awfully odd looks from passers-by. At that moment a group of people walked just behind him and he caught a few words of what they were saying. Packed with ugly moles, of course. Harry swung round. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with blazing red hair. Each of them were pushing a trunk like Harry's in front, and they had a pig. Heart-hammering, Harry pushed his cart after them. They abruptly stopped, but Harry didn't, and he ploughed right into the lot of them, causing carts and people to fly every which way. "Oh, sorry," Harry said nervously as he picked up his pig's gauge. "Quite all right, dearie. No one's dead, right boys?" the plump woman said, dusting herself off and getting to her feet. There was a moaning grunt from the boys as they got up and worked to get their trunks, which had all fallen over, upright once more onto the carts. "Now, what's that platform?" said the boy's mother. "Platform E," piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. "Mom, can't I go?" "You're not old enough, Ginny, now be quiet." "All right, Percy, you go first. You know what happens if you're slightly off, so do be careful." What looked like the oldest boy marched toward platforms 2 and 3. Harry watched, careful not to blink in case he missed it. But just as the boy reached the dividing barrier between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of Asian tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time the last backpack had cleared away, the boy had vanished. "Fred, you next," the plump woman said. "I'm not Fred, I'm George," said the boy. "Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother?" "Sorry, George, dear." Off he went. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done so, because a second later, he had gone, but how had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly toward the barrier. He was almost there, and then, quite suddenly, he wasn't anywhere. Harry wasn't sure what was going on. "Excuse me," Harry said to the plump woman. "Oh, now what is it this time?" she said impatiently. "Is this your first time at Hogwarts?" "Obviously. Ron's new, too." She pointed at the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall, sickly thin, and gangling, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Yes, said Harry. The thing is, I don't know how to. How to get onto the platform? She said sharply, and Harry nodded. All you have to do is walk straight at the barrier between platforms 2 and 3. Don't stop and don't let it know you're scared or you'll crash into it, that's very important. And make sure to hit it slightly on the right or you'll wind up in the African desert like Ron's brother his first time. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on, go now before Ron. Okay, said Harry. He backed his trolley up around 100 feet or so and stared at the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk quickly toward it. People jostled him on their way to platforms 2 and 3. Harry began to run, then went faster and faster. He was going to smash right into that barrier and then he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his cart, he broke into his top speed and screamed. The barrier was coming nearer and nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop, the cart was out of control, he was 10 feet away. He closed his eyes tight ready for the crash and screamed even louder. It didn't come. He kept on running. A moment later he opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was right in front of him. This time he really was going to crash. Pow! Harry's books and things smashed their way onto the train while the cart impaled Harry's stomach. Harry weakly began collecting his things, again. A sign overhead said Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the barrier had been, with the words Platform E embroidered on it. He had done it. He didn't know how but he done it. He actually gotten there early, a good 2 minutes to spare. Harry was quite certain he had never been early to anything in his life before. Smoke and soot bellowed out from the engine covering Harry and his things. After several coughs, he thought he'd better start finding himself a seat. Harry began making his way through the chattering crowd, while stray cats of every color wound here and there between his legs. Pigs grunted to one another in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few cars were already packed with students, many half hanging out of the window to talk to their families, with others fighting over seats. Harry pressed his cart onward down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying, "Yo Gran, I've lost my toad again." "Oh Neville, you'll never make it in the real world," he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. "Give us some, Lee, come on." The boy lifted the lid of a box in his arms, and the people around him hooted and applauded. Harry pressed on through the mob until he discovered an unfilled compartment near the end of the train. He put Pigwiggy inside first and then started to thrust his trunk up to the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps but could hardly raise one end and twice he dropped it painfully on his foot. "Want a hand?" It was one of the red-haired twins he'd followed through the barrier. "Yes, please," Harry panted. "Oi, Fred. Come here and help." With Fred's help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. "Thanks," said Harry, reaching out his sweaty hand for a thank you shake. "What's that?" said one of the twins suddenly, pointing at Harry's smiley face scar. "Blimey," said the other twin. "Are you Dash?" "He is," said the first twin. "Aren't you?" he added to Harry. "What?" said Harry. "Harry Potter," sang the twins. "Oh, him," said Harry. "I mean, yes. Yes I am." The two boys gawked at him, and bent down to kiss his feet. Harry felt himself turning red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating in through the train's open door. "Fred? George? Are you there?" "Coming, Mom." With one last kiss each, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window where, half hidden, he could spy on the red-haired family and hear what they were saying. Their mother had just taken out her handkerchief. "Ron, you've got something on your nose." The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him, spit in his face, and began rubbing the end of his nose. "Mom, cheer off!" He thrashed around until he was free. "Has Uncle Ronnie got something on his nosey?" said one of the twins. "Better than having your whole face," said Ron. "Where's Percy, our perfect child?" said their mother. "He's coming now." The oldest boy came strutting into view. He had transformed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. For Percy? Was he supposed to have one with an H? Was it some sort of... Oh no. The name tag. Harry had forgotten this on his list. "Can't stay long, Mother," he said. "I'm up front, the perfects have got 2 luxury cars to themselves." "Oh, are you perfect, Percy?" said one of the twins, with an air of great surprise. "You should have said something, we had no idea." "Hang on, I think I remember him saying something about it," said the other twin. "Once. Or twice. A minute. All summer." "Well, I am perfect, you know," said Percy the perfect. "How come Percy gets new robes, anyway?" said one of the twins. "Because he's perfect," said their mother fondly. "All right, Pumpkin, have a high-quality term, send me a pig when you get there." She pinched Percy on the cheek and then he left. Then she turned to the twins. "Now, you two, this year, you conduct yourselves appropriately. If I get one more pig telling me you've blown up a teacher or..." "Blown up a teacher? We've never blown up a teacher." "Great idea though, thanks Mom." "It's not amusing. And look after Ron." "Don't worry, Uncle Ronnykins will be protected from us." "Shut up," said Ron. His nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it. "Hey Mom, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train?" Harry leaned back hastily so they couldn't see him creeping. "You recollect that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? Know who he is?" "Who?" "Harry effing Potter." "Fred." "I'm George." Harry then heard the little girl's voice. "Oh, Mom, can I go on the train and look at him, Mom, please?" "You've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you ogle at." "Is he really, George? How are you certain?" "Asked him. Saw his scar. It's really there, like a smiley face all right." No wonder he was alone. I wondered why he had no parents of his own to see him off. But I guess that explains why he was ever so rude when he asked how to get onto the platform. No parents to set him straight. Never mind that. Do you think he remembers what you know perfectly well who I'm talking about looks like? Their mother abruptly became extremely grim. "I prohibit you from asking him. No, don't you dare." As if he wants reminding of that on his first day at school. All right, keep your wig on." "How did you not?" A whistle sounded. "Hasten up," their mother said, and the 3 boys clambered onto the train. They leaned out of the doorway to wave goodbye, and their younger sister began to cry. "Don't, Ginny, we'll send you oodles of pigs. We'll even send you a Hogwarts teacher's head." "George." The train began to budge. Harry saw the boy's mother waving and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train. Then Ginny tripped and fell and began crying even louder. Harry watched the girl now grabbing her knee and her mother attempting to comfort her until they disappeared as the train rounded the corner. Back alleys of businesses now flashed past the window. Harry felt an enormous increase of excitement. He didn't know where he was going, but it must be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open and the youngest red-headed boy barged in. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing at the seat contrary to Harry's. "Everywhere else is full." Harry shook his head and the boy sat down. His eyes locked with Harry's and then looked quickly out of the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he still had a black smudge on his nose. "Yo, Ron." The twins were back. "Pay attention, we're going down to the middle of the train. We hear Lee Jordan's got some." "Well, that's neat to know, isn't it?" "Right," mumbled Ron. "Harry," said the other twin, "did we introduce ourselves?" "Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our Weasley little brother. So long, then." "Bye," said Harry and Ron. Their eyes locked once more, but this time with a smile. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them, noticing their reaction. "Are you really the Harry Potter?" Ron blurted out. Harry confirmed. "Oh, well, I thought it might be one of Fred and George's jokes," said Ron. "And have you really got, you know?" He pointed at Harry's brow. Harry pulled back his messy, greasy hair to reveal the smiley face scar. Ron stared. "So that's where you know perfectly well who I'm talking about, Dash." "Sure, why not?" said Harry. "I don't remember anything really." "Nothing?" said Ron eagerly. "Well, okay, I do remember a lot of green light. But I don't know what that means." "Wow," said Ron with another small smile. He sat and stared into Harry's eyes for a few moments with his mouth half open. Then, as though he had suddenly realized what he was doing, he looked quickly out of the window again. "Are all your family wizards?" asked Harry, who found Ron just as attractive as Ron found him. Yes, I think so," said Ron. "I believe Mom's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him since the, unpleasantness." "So you must know tons of magic already." "Not really. Dad always said he'd rather put food on the table than send us to pre-wizard school." The Weasleys were clearly one of those poor wizarding families the pale boy in Diagon Alley had talked about. "I heard you went to dwell with the Moles," said Ron. "What are they like?" "Horrible people, the lot of them. I wish I'd had 3 wizard brothers. Someone to play with, someone to share secrets." "5, inserted Ron. For some reason, Ron's rosy cheeks were now looking gloomy. "I'm the 6th in our kin to go to Hogwarts. You might say I've got plenty to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was boy-in-chief and Charlie was El Capitan of Quidditch. Now Percy's perfect. Fred and George mess around a lot, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone I know expects me to do at least as well as the others, but even if I pull it off, it's no big hoop, because they did it initially. I never get anything new, either. I've been given Bill's old robes, Charlie's used wand, and Percy's old rat." Ron reached inside his jacket and yanked out a tubby grey rat, which was either asleep or dead. "His name's Scabbers and he's beyond useless," Ron went on about the rat. "He scarcely ever wakes up. Percy got a pig from my dad for being made perfect, but they couldn't offer, I got Scabbers instead." Ron's whole face went red. He seemed to think he said something he shouldn't have. Clearly, Harry thought, his suspicions of Ron's family being poor now confirmed. Harry was doubtful this boy had a large vault full of money like his. He must remain cautious with this one, he wouldn't want to make friends with the mooch. So instead he told Ron all about having to wear Bubba's old garments and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up. "And until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about being a wizard or about my parents or old Voldemort." Ron gasped, grabbed his ears, and quickly fell to the floor. "What?" said Harry. "You said you know perfectly well who I'm talking about's name," said Ron, sounding both shocked and scared. "I'd have thought you, of all people." "I'm not trying to be brave or anything, I just like saying the name," said Harry. "Voldemort. See?" Ron grabbed his ears once more. "Well, I like it, sounds like an expensive bed and breakfast villa in the country. Welcome to Voldemort. See what I mean?" Another wince. "I just never knew you shouldn't say it." I've got plenty to learn about your ways, and I bet I'm the worst wizard in the class. Yeah, maybe. But there are loads of kids who come from mole families and sometimes learn quick enough. Others, though, can't make the cut and end up going back to the mole world within a semester. They both turned to stare out the window. Whilst they were talking, the train had taken them out of London. Now they were speeding past the slaughterhouses in the country with corrals full of pigs and cows. They were silent for a time, watching the fields and animals flick past. Was this new school going to chew up Harry and spit him out too? Around 12:30 there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and then a smiling, plump woman burst through their door and said, "Anything off the cart, dears?" Harry, who hadn't eaten hardly anything in his last days with the Drubbles, leapt to his feet, but Ron's face went red again and he muttered that he'd brought sandwiches and would only take his free sip. Harry meanwhile went into the corridor to check out what was on the cart. He had never had any funds for sweets with the Drubbles, and now that he was loaded he was ready to buy as many Butterfinger bars as he could carry, but the woman didn't have Butterfingers. What she did have were Betty Bott's every flavor beans, Drooble's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to neglect anything, he got some of everything and paid the woman handsomely for it. She said thanks while nodding to the tip jar, and Harry dumped some more coinage inside, not really knowing how much he had just spent but also not really caring. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and dumped it onto the empty seat next to Harry. "Hungry, are you?" "Starving," said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pasty and immediately spitting it out. "Blah. These are terrible." "Not a fan of pumpkin?" "I guess not." Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There was a sad little sandwich inside. He pulled it apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like bologna." "Are you not going to eat that?" said Harry. "You don't want this, it's all dry," said Ron. "Sure I do, give it here," said Harry, who had never had anything like bologna before and wanted to try that too. It was a nice feeling, sitting there with someone who didn't despise him, eating his way through all the things Harry never had before: pasties, cakes, candies and the bologna sandwich. Ron, however, just sat and licked his lips, or just stared out the window some more. "What are these?" Harry asked Ron, hoisting up a bunch of chocolate frogs. "They're not really dead frogs covered in chocolate, are they?" He was beginning to feel that these wizards would eat anything. "No," said Ron. "But see what the card is. I'm missing Agrippa." "What?" "Oh, of course, you wouldn't know, chocolate frogs have cards, inside them, you know, to collect famous witches and wizards. I've got about 500, but I haven't got Agrippa or Ptolemy." "I thought you were poor." Harry caught himself. Why was this seemingly poor kid able to buy nearly 500 chocolate frogs? Something seemed fishy here. I thought you were polite before. When the lady came. With the cart." Okay." Ron gave a perplexed look. Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and pulled out the card. It showed a man's face. He wore bunny-shaped glasses, had a long, crooked nose, and flowing silver hair, beard, and moustache. Underneath the picture was the name School Bus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore?" said Harry. "Don't tell me you'd never heard of the Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog? I might get Agrippa." Harry flipped the card over and read aloud, ignoring Ron. "School Bus the Killer Dumbledore. Presently headmaster of Hogwarts. Worshipped by many as the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is practically perfect in every way. Particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Adolf Hitler in 1945, for the discovery of his 12 uses for human blood, and his work on alchemy with his BFF, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys West Coast hip-hop and interpretive dance. Harry turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore had disappeared. He's gone. Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day, said Ron. He'll be back. Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. Harry quickly said, "You know, in the mole world people just stay put in photographs." "Do they now? They don't move at all?" Ron sounded shocked. "How creepy." Harry watched intently as Dumbledore tiptoed back into the image and gave Harry a wink. Ron seemed to act like magic cards were commonplace, but Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Warcraft, Alberic the Burner, Prometheus, Merlin, and Jane Goodall. He finally tore his eyes away from the Duchess of Malcontent, who was scratching her nose, to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. "You ought to be rather cautious with those," Ron advised Harry. "When they say every flavor, they mean every flavor, you know. You get all the ordinary ones like chocolate and peppermint and taco, but then you can get spinach or spoiled fish. George reckons he had a cotton-flavored one once. May I?" Ron picked up a green bean without waiting for Harry's reply. He looked at it carefully and took the tiniest bite into a corner. "Bleewag, see? Poison ivy. Even itches some." Harry noticed small blisters began to form around one side of his mouth. Still, they had a good time eating the every flavor beans. Harry made Ron his official taste tester and eventually tried burnt toast, coconut, baked bean, strawberry, aluminium, sand, beach, paper, lemon, birchwood, squirrel, ghost pepper, breakfast, leather, curry, grass, motor oil, and Harry was eventually brave enough to nibble the end of a funny off-white one Ron refused to touch, which Harry assumed was salt. The scenery now flying past the window pane was becoming wilder. The neat rows of cows had gone. Now there were woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a bang on the door of their compartment and the round-faced boy Harry had passed on platform came in. He looked like he'd been weeping buckets. "Pardon the interruption," he said, "but have you seen a toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "I've misplaced him. He keeps sneaking away from me." "He'll appear someday," assumed Harry. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him." He left without leaving instructions. "Don't know why he's so troubled," said Ron. "If I'd brought a toad I'd throw it out the window as soon as we made it out of London. Toads, blag. Or," he went on, "I'd throw it to the ground and give it a big squash." He had just raised his hand to do the motion when the compartment door slid open again. The toad boy was back, but on this occasion he had a girl with him. She was already dolled up in her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone noticed a toad hopping around the train? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a dominant sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair, and rather large front teeth. "We've previously declared we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand on the seat next to Ron. He had taken it out of his trunk when grabbing his sandwich. "Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see it, then." She sat down. Ron looked confused. All right." He cleared his throat as he took out Scabbers and picked up his wand. "Ziplin, crazies, Japanese dew, turn this stupid, fat rat blue." He shook his wand violently, but nothing took place. Scabbers remained grey and fast asleep. "How confident are you that's a real spell?" said the girl. "Well, it's not very useful regardless, is it? I've attempted a small number of straightforward spells just for the heck of it and it's all turned out well for me. Not one person in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a bombshell once I opened up my letter, but I was ever so delighted. Obviously, I mean, it's the most excellent school of witchcraft there is, or so I've heard. I've read through all our course books, didn't you? I'm Hermione Granger, by the way, and you are? She said all this very fast. Ron muttered. Harry Potter, said Harry. Are you really? Said Hermione. I know all about you, of course. I acquired scores of extra books, for a bit of light reading, and you're in history's modern magic, remarkable happenings that shaped our lives and the rise and fall of the dark side of the Force. I am? Said Harry, feeling confused. Great googly moogly. Didn't you know? You're legendary. I'd find out everything I could if it was me, said Hermione. Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking around for the inside scoop, and I hope I'm in Viacom. It sounds by far the best. I hear the Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Gryffindor wouldn't be all that bad if it came to it. Whatever, we better continue to look for Neville's toad before someone steps on it. You two had better change, you know, I expect we'll be there in no time. And she pranced out the door, yanking the toadless boy with her. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it, said Ron. He threw his wand into his trunk. Stupid spell, George suggested it to me, bet he knew it was a dud. What houses are your brothers in? Asked Harry. Gryffindor, the lot of them, said Ron. Gloom seemed to be settling on him again. Mom and Dad were in it, too. Dad says I'll be kicked out of the family if I'm not. I suppose Viacom wouldn't be a terrible place, but I'd hang myself if they put me in Slytherin. That's the house volume, I mean, you know perfectly well who I'm talking about was in? Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking severely depressed. You know, I think the end is near for Scabbers, he really does look old and weak, said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses. So what do your oldest brothers do now that they've left, anyway? Harry was unsure of what a wizard did for money once you finished school. Charlie's in Romania Jane Goodling dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts, said Ron. Were you informed about the Gringotts fiasco? It's been all over the Daily Heretic, but I don't suppose you get that with the Mulls, someone tried to rob the place. Harry's eyes went wide, almost popping out of their sockets. Really? What happened? Harry instantly feared someone had broken in and looted his vault. Nothing, that's why it's such historic news. Those who done it haven't been caught. My pops says it must have been a mighty dark wizard to get round Gringotts without being detected, but they also don't think they took anything, and that's what's so funny about this whole thing. Course, everyone gets in a frizzle when something like this happens. In case you know perfectly well who I'm talking about is pulling the strings behind the operation. Harry cranked this news through his mind. He was starting to get a slight tingling sensation every time you know perfectly well who I'm talking about was mentioned, and he had to admit that he kinda liked it. Though he'd never mention this to Ron. What's your Quidditch team? Ron asked. I don't know any. Harry confessed. What? Ron looked dumbfounded. Oh, you just hold your horses, it's the best game in the world, and he was off, explaining all about the 4 balls and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he'd been to with his brothers and the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the cash. Sounds pretty dumb to me, Harry replied. I mean, what's the point of scoring points when all you have to do is... Just then, the compartment door slid open yet again, but it wasn't Neville the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys barged in, and Harry identified the middle one without delay. It was the pale boy from Madame Mim's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with even more interest than he'd shown back in Diagon Alley. Oh, it's you, Harry proclaimed. Come to give me an update on what your mom and dad and Uncle Watson are up to? Is it true? He said. They're proclaiming all up and down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yep, said Harry. He was earing up the other boys. Both of them were thick-set and looked extremely mean. Not exactly his type for friends. Standing on either side of the pale boy in dark sunglasses, they looked more like bodyguards. "Oh, this is Crabby and this is Goyle," said the pale boy carelessly, noticing where Harry was looking. "And my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy, and don't you be forgetting the Draco." Ron gave a slight cough, which was obviously trying to hide a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. "Think my name's amusing, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father disclosed to me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford." He turned back to Harry. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." He held out his hand to shake Harry's, and Harry obliged with a firm gesture. "Seems like you're certainly the right chap I should be in bed with, friends with I mean, thanks," he said with shifty eyes. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but a pink tinge did up in his pale cheeks. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter," he said matter-of-factly. "You hang around riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you." Ron stood up. "Say that again," Ron said, his face as red as his hair. "Oh, you're going to fight us, are you?" Malfoy sneered. "Hey guys, let's not do this," said Harry quietly. Well now, what's this? We've eaten all our food but you still seem to have some." Goyle dove toward the chocolate frogs next to Harry. Ron leapt forward to stop him, but before he'd so much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrific shriek. Scabbers the rat was deep-throating Goyle's pointer finger with its sharp little teeth almost all the way up to his knuckle. Crabby and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers round and around, howling. This went on for a few moments, with nobody knowing what to do. Then Scabbers finally flew off and smashed through the window. All three of the intruders disappeared at once, but not before Malfoy yelled, "We'll get you one day, Weasley, and your little rat too." Ron turned to Harry after they had left and said, "Well, I guess they just took care of that second problem, didn't they?" A moment later, Hermione Granger had come in. "What has been going on?" she said, looking at the sweets all over the floor and the smashed window now letting in the cool air from outside. "One of Malfoy's goons threw my rat out the window," Ron said. "Have you met Malfoy before, Harry? You two seem to have a history." Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. "I know the history of his family," said Ron darkly. "They were some of the last to come back to our side after you know perfectly well who I'm talking about vanished. Said they'd been bewitched. Pops doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side of the Force." He shot a look at Hermione. "Do you want something? You'd better scurry and put your robes on. I immediately came from the front to ask the conductor how much longer, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there." "My rat's been doing the fighting, not us," said Ron, scowling at her. "Would you mind leaving while we change?" "I'd much rather stay if that's okay." They both gave her an odd look. "All right, fine, I'll go. I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly, racing up and down the train," said Hermione in a sniffy voice. "And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way, did you know?" Ron scowled at her as she left. Harry poked his head out of the broken window. It was getting dark. He could see the highlands under a profound purple sky. The train did appear to be decelerating. He and Ron took off their clothes and pulled on their long black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him, you could see his whole sneakers under them. They were also rather warm. A voice boomed throughout the train, "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 30 seconds. Ever so kindly leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately after a security sweep." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves at the thought of an unknown security officer going through his baggage. And Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. Harry crammed his pockets with the last of the sweets and they both headed out into the crowded corridor. The train braked and finally stopped with a jolt, sending kids and luggage flying. People untangled themselves and made their way toward the door and out onto a tiny, shadowy platform. Harry quivered in the icy night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the crowns of the pupils, and Harry heard an all too familiar voice, "Fur's years. Fur's years over here. Harry. You made it. Was a bit worried you'd missed the train, what with you not knowing what to do and all." Hagrid's giant hairy face beamed over the ocean of heads. "Come on, walk this way, any more Fur's years. Mind your step. If yer trip and fall and break yer head, don't be bloomin' me now. Fur's years follow me." Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, rocky, narrow trail. It was so dark on either side of them that Harry couldn't see beyond a few feet. Once or twice, he thought he saw a pair of yellow eyes staring back at him. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, now kept losing his footing and tripped again and again, which scraped his knees. Harry could tell he was trying ever so hard not to burst out in tears. "You'll get your first peek at Hogwarts in a second," Hagrid hollered over his shoulder, "just round the next 32 bends." Eventually, there was a loud "oh-oo-oo." The narrow path ended suddenly on top of a cliff above a great black lake. At least Harry thought it was a lake, being that it was completely flat. Balanced atop a high mountain on the further side, with a huge amount of smoke billowing from its chimneys, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. The students then climbed down an even more dangerous path and eventually arrived at the water's edge. "No more'n 4 to a boat. 'Less you'd like a watery end," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little dinghies sitting by the shore. Harry and Ron followed Neville and Hermione into one of the boats. "Everyone in?" barked Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. "Right then, forward." And the armada of tiny boats moved off the bank all at once and slithered through the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was scared silent, staring up at the impenetrable fortress overhead, being greatly intimidated about the upcoming school year. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it was mounted. "Heads up!" yelled Hagrid. "Or I guess that's head down." As the first boats reached the cliff, they all turtled their heads as the little dinghies carried them into a long, dark tunnel which appeared to be taking them right underneath the castle, and whose ceiling got lower and lower until it was just above the boat. Soon they found themselves in a large opening at a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. "Oi, what's this? A toad? Quick, someone throw it back," said Hagrid, who was inspecting the boats as people climbed out of them. "No. It's Trevor!" cried Neville ecstatically, holding out his hands. Harry wondered if that really was Neville's toad or a different one that just happened to be there. The odds did seem to be in the latter's favor. Then they clambered up a passageway carved in the rock by following Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last from a secret trapdoor in the lawn right in front of the castle. They strolled up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the massive oak front door. "Everyone here? You there, still got your blasted toad, boy?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and tapped 3 times on the castle door.